Welcome to the Team Teach podcast. I'm Claire, and in each episode you'll find me talking with an expert guest to learn more about behaviour. We squeeze a lot into each episode. You'll listen to the latest thinking in behaviour, continue your professional development with our book recommendation, and then I'll send you away with 3 practical tips you can use in your setting. I'm joined today by Shaheen Myers. Shaheen is a leadership wellbeing advisor, keynote speaker, and former system leader in education with over 2 decades of experience across schools and children's services. She previously served as Deputy Director for Learning within a large city's children's service, where she led strategic work to improve inclusion, wellbeing, and outcomes for more than 100,000 children and young people. And today, Shaheen and I are discussing the human side of school leadership. Enjoy the episode. Hi Shaheen, how are you?
Hi Claire, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really well. Oh, we're so lucky to have you on. We've had, and the listeners hate this, but we've had a lovely chat off air, getting really excited about the topic. And we are going to talk through the human side of school leadership, which is also the title of a book from Routledge publisher that's just come out. And it's such an important topic. It is tough in schools, so I think this is going to be really well received. Do you mind just starting us off with a bit deeper, I guess, about your experience in this topic and how it all started?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Shaheen. I've spent past 25 years in education now, and we all say it's an advocacy, don't we? It's somewhat of a passion and somewhat of a love for it, and you see different iterations going through, and you see leaders come and go. You see great schools and schools that are struggling, and the same with maths. And through all the different roles I've had, I have uniquely, and I suppose with some privilege, been able to have a 360 approach to it. So I've inspected, I've been a deputy director for education for a large local authority, so all the schools and colleges. I've been a head, been executive leader, professional development lead. So in all those aspects, and then a trustee. I'm a trustee on 2 boards. I've got this sort of 360 view, which when you use that to advocate can only be a really good thing. So yes, I started off as a teacher in the heart of a very large council estate in Kirklees in a 4-form entry junior school. And I say that was kind of made there. It was fantastic. It was so many challenges, but then so many great opportunities, and fell in love with the job and the role. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I would say is some of my career. And then I pivoted through a personal tragedy in 2022. I lost my husband, who was a teacher. And we both shared this approach of philosophy of unconditional positive regard. We could see injustices, we could see systems that failed our children, and we could see individuals that were failing our children too. And we shared this sense of how inclusive are we in our own practice, but in the way that we are, so that in our being, so that I should feel safe within their care with us. And I was advocating for the children and the children's sort of point of view. And he was a phenomenal teacher, and Balance was born out of grief, really, to support our leaders in education, to really think about culture, unconditional regard, relational practice, but also from a leader's point of view, which for me, I feel is incredibly missing. How do we support our leaders who are doing a phenomenal job in supporting children and young people with very little resource and care really put into how complex and what an emotional toll the job now entails from what it used to be like? So that kind of is where my starting point is. But then if you want to go back, I started off as a child who was permanently excluded in year 11 during my exam period. And I suppose that was the catalyst really for me spending my life in education to make sure that children's voices were heard. And I think for me, if I don't achieve anything else, my legacy for me was when I was the first female Pakistani to get the job in Leeds. And the legacy is that we had 0 permanent exclusions for a city of 118,000 children and young people. And that wasn't because we isolated schools or isolated children or isolated families. It's because we had a cohesive relational practice response where our schools and the local authority worked hand in hand, really, to make sure that inclusion offer for the city was such that we wouldn't exclude via a message of "you're not welcome, you don't matter," but one of "we'll support you when you're struggling the most," really. I suppose that's my kind of fire in my belly, so to speak. That means that that's what I keep and retain.
Yeah, I really hear that. And, just to say that I'm so sorry about that personal loss, but I hear how that's, yeah, created this vision and this passion as well. And it's turned in the grief has turned into this drive. And I hear that in what you're saying. And it's such an important work to support everyone working in those environments, because like you said, it is tough. I know listeners know that my background is working in lots of different services, like fairly similar to you, but primarily I'm in a school now, and I see it firsthand that burnout is real. The stresses are huge, the complex family systems, the cost of living, like all of these things really attribute to things being higher pressure and harder. Did you know that Team Teach also offers a coaching and consultancy service? It's an effective way to build positive cultures. Let's work together to map out a strategic plan tailored around your needs, support your staff with coaching sessions from our experienced team, and help you create, change and improve professional practice throughout your organisation. Visit the Team Teach website to find out more. We talk about reflection quite a lot on this podcast, and I'm really intrigued to hear about what you wish you knew then that you know now about this topic.
Gosh, the human side of leadership. I suppose it's saying that we're not perfect and to lean into that a little bit more. We've isolated leadership out. You have leadership at different levels of sometimes an us and them approach, or an us and the MAT central team approach, or us and the CEO approach, and us and the head teacher approach. And sometimes we can be so singular in our focus that actually they're not human. And what we have leaders who are doing an incredible job, but are not really in that realm of being able to show the vulnerability part of it. And I always say when I do my keynotes that vulnerability is a magnet, not a repellent. And for me, it's going back and saying and feeling that it's actually okay to be flawed, and it's okay to be human, and it's okay to give yourself permission to be able to do that, but also to model that. So we all have the leadership hats and the models and the various ways of doing things. And I suppose all of the leadership suite that we work through is all about those leadership models. What is the most effective type of leader who's going to be able to do progress and inclusion and support the community and sort of all of those aspects. And actually, where is the heart of it, which is how do you protect and look after yourself? So for me, I wish I'd known that, but I've always kept that central. I've always kept the human side of that central, which I suppose is why I've been able to pivot myself into different roles. But I wish that I had modelled it perhaps a bit more, given the external pressure not to, I suppose. And we just need a few leaders to demonstrate that, and then it starts to fall away, the stereotype of this is how I should be as a leader. I need to hold it all together. I need to be brave and calm and lead well, and not show that vulnerability. I remember a head teacher who is a phenomenal head teacher sitting in a car park on the phone to me saying, I really can't go through the school. I can't go into the school building. And hadn't to that point let anyone know how he was feeling. And he's feeling anxiety. He had a lot of anxiety. And that just happened to come around from actually no circumstances. But once we talked through his feelings, how he felt, why, and got a little bit deeper, he opened up to his SLT team, and it was the most productive SLT meeting that's ever had before, because actually they were able to lean in far more and support. And it wasn't a case of I need help. It was just a case of this is how I'm feeling. And we've kind of put those two things together. If I need help, therefore that means that I'm failing. So I wish I had perhaps known that earlier.
Yeah, it loads of bits resonated there that you said about that human side of leadership, but the vulnerability part. And I think I can really relate to it, sort of leading in some schools when I was quite a bit younger, but being absolutely petrified of showing vulnerability to people because of the stereotypes of a leader, you just got to suck it up and, get on with it. But also I feel like that often was modeled to me as well through, you learn through how people model, and other leaders that I'd come across in my kind of, school career modeled those things as well. And I know you've talked somewhat about how we can show that vulnerability, that kind of honesty, that transparency. But what do you think the key is? Because it's breaking a barrier down to kind of achieve that.
No, it is. I think what we're on the treadmill of is constant improvement, and that treadmill is having a huge effect on stress and mental health and well-being. A huge stress on that and toll. And until we're able to get off that treadmill, so we say we need to be doing better, and that's accepting that at any given moment in time we're doing as well as we can do. That of course is always going to be that improvement cycle. And we need to be making progress towards our vision, our values, our strategies, and our KPIs. If every single thing is about improvement, what we're saying to ourselves inadvertently is we're not good enough. And until we get to the point where we feel, when I used to inspect, in my head, a question I would have is the school doing what it can given the circumstances that it's in, or can it do better? It's just that constant question that you're being told externally through external pressure, and sometimes internal pressure, that things are not great. And until we reset and put the standard of, well, our improvement can come, but it can also come internally via ourselves as leaders as well, by recognizing that we're human, by recognizing that there are things for us to do. Of course there are, but how do we do it humanely? How do we do it so that we're not putting everybody under far more pressure than needs to be? What do our staff meetings look like? What does our timetable look like? What does our self-improvement plans look like? What does our school evaluation form look like? How is it evidence to showcase us as individuals in the school and community, as opposed to what other people want to hear and feel? And that's really hard. There's no key to that. There's no answer to that, because we are external validators, because we have to be. That's because of the accountability system. So until the accountability system allows us to be human, we will always have to, unfortunately, fulfill the role of I can't fundamentally. Now, you do have some brave leaders out there that are challenging the system, but often they're challenging the system at cost themselves.
Yeah, because as you were speaking, I was like, this is like a big systems theory kind of idea, is that unless the system changes inherently, you can be someone that's trying to change direction, but the system's always kind of pulling you in that direction of, I mean, of course, schools have to have some accountability, but that results driven idea. But also I was thinking about this in lines of also, I guess, being a practitioner in a school, that it's not just the results of leaders, but it's the results of the children, like the SATs, the GCSEs, all of those things of being markers. But then what's missed is the journey. And I've always found that strange in schools, that you have an output, you're like, that's the GCSE, that's the exam results, that's the reading ages, whatever the output is, but you miss that there's a whole journey to kind of get to there, and that journey is not, for me, my experience, it's not kind of celebrated enough. And I don't mean that in the individual schools necessarily, I mean it as the system as a whole, and that's such a frustration. It makes it so hard.
That's where you've got the difference, haven't you, between progress and outcomes, and you're judged by the outcomes, and less so now in the progress. And that's simply because, again, of an accountability system that is focused inherently on what are the outputs. I remember a secondary school people saying to me they're only concerned about what my results are, as opposed to how I get there. And what that was saying was, what skills do I have, and how am I shown in order to get there? That's my goal. But what I actually need is some support. And I thought that was really telling, because that's from out of the mouth of babes, right? It's out of the mouth of them to say, this school values only mine. Now that's not the case for everybody. That was just his reflection on that, and I thought it was quite telling.
Yeah, and I think it is telling, but I think there are also things, like you mentioned in your book quite a bit. You mentioned in the introduction, there are things that individual leaders or teams of leaders can do to really help those things. And I know you've spoken about it, a bit before, but this idea of just having kind of tick boxes, as opposed to having a human leadership style. Just wondered if you could talk a bit more about that, about how we can move away from this. Okay, cool, well-being's done. I've got a tick sheet. I don't know, like all of this is done. I've got a tick sheet, but how do we sort of move away from that?
No, that's a really good question. Culture is well-being. So until we can extrapolate and not think about the two as being any sort of separate,
Hmm.
culture is well-being and well-being is culture. It's how we feel in schools, how we feel in those environments. It's not necessarily what we're doing. So I often say it's not raiding IKEA soft furnishings to make the staff room look nice, or it's not having a coffee machine. They're perks. So we've got this idea of perks that are really nice and helpful, like a well-being day or a drop-down day or Christmas shopping day, and things that people do to say, these are the things that we can promote that will help support well-being. But what we have to look at is, how do people feel on a daily basis within that environment? Are they cared for? Are they supported? Are they able to raise concerns? Do they feel that there's professional development? Do they know how well that they are achieving? And then you've got the correlation. And happiness is job satisfaction. So how do we know we are making a difference? How is that communicated? I'm very mindful, having been in all those roles, that we don't condescend the profession anymore by saying you need an action plan, which is ironic, because it's ironic to have an action plan for well-being when people are struggling with time to create an action plan in the first place. And then it often gets pushed upon somebody called the well-being lead. Well, the well-being lead might be an assistant head teacher who's responsible for English and responsible for assessment and so on and so forth. So what we need to do is have a common sense approach. It really is about, what do we do in the everyday? How do we strengthen the everyday, as opposed to, I need a policy, I need an action plan. And we need to think about things that are external, where we can evidence well-being. So we lean into methods of connection. Are we connected to one another? Do we use our interactions to make sure that our ratio of positive to negative is higher than the negatives? Do we stem negative and the spirals of negativity and the culture of negativity? Because then it takes one person to spread a culture of negativity in school, because it drips. It's exactly like COVID. It's proven to be like COVID. One person to another person to another person to another person. Before you know it, you've dripped through entire surfaces all over school and to your children. So really, what is the energy and the vibe in that school and that organisation? That is only created by how people turn up, show up, and actually are on a daily basis, while still being absolutely 100% human. So toxic positivity is not going to work. Realism is. And saying, look, this is about how we are, how we interact, and how well we feel supported. So I talk a lot about connecting questions and finding out about your colleagues at a deeper level than just the superficial. Once you feel understood, understanding somebody is how you show belonging, but most importantly, how you show mattering, because you know that person beyond their role, beyond their title.
Yeah, because it's almost like it's like peeling back the smoke and mirrors in school, like a little bit. That's what's coming to my mind, where it's like, oh yeah, like all these things are sort of set up to evidence that you're doing blah blah, whatever the blah blah is. But when you start to peel away those layers and get rid of the smoke and mirrors, you're left with some humans in a room trying to get along, trying to connect, trying to feel a sense of belonging under the same roof. Like that's essentially, going back to the bare bones. And it's so interesting having this chat with you, because it is so lost and it feels so real when you're in it. All the paper and the evidence and the spreadsheets. God, yeah, love an excellent spreadsheet that, I don't know, shows that so and so's like happy or whatever, the scale is. But you peel all of it away, and actually what you're describing is trying to create this culture where we respond, care, listen. It's all like values based interactions.
Absolutely. I talk about in the work that I do the idea of doing performance management and professional development slightly differently, where it's led by the person, so they have the complete autonomy and efficacy. And we know voice and influence is fundamental again to also job satisfaction. So how do people feel autonomous in their roles and able to lead their own development, while also being completely mindful that there are certain objectives and KPIs and a vision and a strategy to also achieve. And it's difficult when schools are in very difficult circumstances, but that's when I say you lean in more. I also do something called the Real Staff Survey. So I don't feel that the metrics of these staff, this anonymous staff survey, is captured on a laptop and then evaluated. And you sense sort of the themes of it really capture the essence of how people feel. So the questions around, have you ever thought about leaving the role? Give me examples when you felt like this. And so the Real Staff Survey really pulls, what does your head teacher value? What does your leader value? What do your pupils, do you think they value? And everything sort of comes out in these real questions, and that you get a really keen measure of what it's like on a day-to-day basis. And that's what some staff surveys are not able to capture. That's culture.
Yeah, like the realness. Like, again, you peel back the layers, get rid of the smoke and mirrors, that this is really what's going on culturally or systemically, kind of in the school system. And that's so important to have that idea as a leader, that you actually understand the views and the day-to-day of the individuals that are working there. I think that's super important.
It is. And also having time to reflect in the commodity of time. And we know how the busyness of everything that's become even more busy, is we're in a world where our thinking is limited and our thinking is capped by multiple interruptions because of the time that we have, and also the way we are as leaders and sort of educators, is to get to the answer really quickly. And so you have a scramble of thinking and a scramble of interruptions and a scramble of thought and a scramble of speaking. And actually the quality of thinking, that's determined by, so the quality of outcome is determined by the quality of thinking. But how do we ensure that we've got quality thinking? Well, that's culture piece. That we don't need to have necessarily a wellbeing day, but actually does our quality of thinking, do we do that incredibly well? And do we share generative listening in order for people to really feel seen and heard, get their point across? Now, paradoxically, so how do we create that? Because we need more time. In fact, it creates more time by virtue of that. And I think the other thing I want to mention is the notion of supervision for wellbeing for leaders is to have a very safe place, independently, objectively, to work through the complex nature of the role and the complexity of thinking and emotional toll, and just resetting themselves. It's the most valuable. If I knew that I had that back in the day, it would have been phenomenal for me. But it's the least used and yet the most rewarding. So I often, leaders, if it's just one thing I can achieve, you walk away feeling lighter, job done. But we're so enthralled and I suppose trapped in this notion of coaching to make us better. But actually, do we need to constantly be on this treadmill of self-improvement, or can we just have a space to really bring clarity of thought and a reset to your nervous system? That happens in wellbeing supervision.
Yeah, I was actually wondering about that, because I know that you sort of write about burnout, and that's one example of how leaders can be looked after in the process and have a safe space. But I do know that I know quite a few leaders in education, and for some reason in education, it's just really hard to sort of encourage people to access that support that's kind of put in there. And I think it goes right back to the start of the episode when you were talking about maybe like the stereotypes of a leader, that I don't know if it is that there's some sort of weakness in accessing the support, or I think often like, I'm too busy for that. Like, how's that going to help? And I see that quite a lot. I actually offer and do some staff wellbeing sessions in my service, and it's pretty well attended actually. But there is it's like, you know, creating a bit of a new culture around it. It's just a bit of time to embed it in for people to see the value of it. And it's not mandated, it's voluntary. But I can, yeah, it's one of those things where there are things offered, but staff find it hard sometimes to take it.
It's the notion around it's a luxury, or as you've said, a negative connotation around it, that actually what I'm displaying is I need help in some form. And actually what it's there to do is sort of a necessary part of leadership, because where else do you have time to be reflective on your feelings and your thoughts and whatever's keeping you up? I always say, what's keeping you up at night? And then it all comes flooding out. Now, where else are you going to get that? And it's a way of, again, allowing process of complexity, whatever's coming up for leaders at the time. And once we get through that notion of it's not a luxury, it's actually necessary for leadership, necessary to sustain leadership. And it certainly will help with recruitment and retention, because you've got a pinch point now. Year 2 of headship is where you sort of see leaders now leaving. And it's just incredibly, well, that sort of shine has worn off, so to speak, then it becomes incredibly difficult, because there's less of a leeway and less of a patience in year 2 for externally than there is in year 1 for our leaders. So we do need it. And I know the white paper has recently nodded towards 2,500 leaders receiving this supervision. But we have 25,000 leaders, so I don't think a nod is going to be suffice enough. If we've got a real recruitment and retention crisis and sustainable leadership, or we need that, then we need to be looking at ways of wrapping around protective support to keep our leaders in the roles, at not at the cost of their own health, because that's fundamental, and not at the cost of their own lives, as we have seen. So we need to do something drastically different. And the quality of education and the quality of our society is dependent on the quality of educators.
Also, losing a head teacher, the system change in that school, and then the fallout. I can't remember what the percentage often is, but you will get like a percentage of staff that leave because of the culture change, and then to build a new culture takes X amount of times, like 3 years, maybe more. And then the people that don't benefit then are obviously the kids, because they're in the flux of all the change. It has such big implications. Shaheen, this has been, I've got the fire in my belly going now. I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I wondered if you could just end the episode with 3 top tips.
Gosh, 3 top tips. I would say for leaders, I mean, I mentioned quite a lot of pragmatic and practical approaches in the book, The Human Side of School Leadership. And for my 3 top tips is it's okay to look after yourself. My top tip is seek wellbeing supervision. Absolutely fundamental. That's the only thing you could possibly do, is to seek that out for yourself. Just give it a go, to lean into it. And my second would be, think about the role of connection within your organisation, the role of connection between you and your teams, and then the wider organisation. What does connection look like for yourselves? Again, not tick box, not a policy, and not an action plan, but we can achieve that through looking at connecting questions to get to know our colleagues a little bit more. I often say, are people connected to you because of your title, or they're connected to you because of who you are? So not feeling as though we need to shield ourselves, our true selves, our essence of us, because by virtue of being human, we are naturally connected to one another. And it's not forgetting that, it's bringing that in. So I would say probably 3 tips within that is lean into the humanness, build connection, and absolutely seek support in the complexity of the role for yourself.
Yeah, it's so interesting stuff, and I can't wait to get hold of a copy of your book. And I know that you've got a conference coming up as well that's really exciting.
Yes, I have indeed, and it's a human side of school leadership conference, and it's all about the conversations that we've had today. But it's about the realness, which I've heard, Claire, you mentioned a few times. And I think when you cut through everything, what is it that we're trying to achieve? So within this conference, we're having those key conversations, and sometimes addressing the elephant in the room. What toll are parental complaints taking on us as leaders and educators? And what are the elements around that we can possibly do from a protective point of view? How can we regain our sense of voice in the profession, in our schools, in our organisations, in how we lead? so that we don't feel that everything is I said, external source of power is out of our control. How do we sustain ourselves and others? So it looks at quite a few of those sort of themes. And then we're hearing from leaders who are practicing leaders. It's very important in a conference that you hear from people who are working the jobs, the roles, the titles, and have that pragmatic approach. And I suppose just the realness. So I would say there's a tagline, keeping it real, probably be the tagline.
Yeah, keep it real. Yeah, I think that is an excellent tagline. Oh, it's been really great to chat to you today, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you very much, Claire. Really lovely talking to you all.
You've been listening to the Team Teach podcast. It's been great to have you here with us as we discuss behaviour, communication, and the ways we can best support those in our care. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.